Kind of late, yeah.
It's just gone 1:30.
Okay,
Yeah.
and on that note, you're here in the mail core. And let's get started. We have an hour. I initially thought we'll finish early, but I suspect there are actually several discussions that might require a bit of more time. So Todd will try to stay on top of it and kick us, if we're not doing it quickly enough. Right, with that, I'm Alexei. Todd is sitting next to me. I assume you all seen Note well. I think pretty much everybody here is a long-time participant, but this is just a quick refresher. Note well, code of conduct, be nice to each other. And again, be nice to each other. We have note-taking is Bron. Thank you, Bron. We only have one set of slides, which is chair slides. Just a quick reminder, if you're in the room, please use masks. When you talk to microphone, don't take them off. Obviously, doesn't apply to remote people, lucky people. Quick recap of the agenda. Hopefully, there is no agenda bashing. There are two items for SMTP spec. The first one about foreclose is kind of SMTP / applicability statement, but and then we would like to get closure on an registration policy. Yes, John.
This is a question rather than necessarily an agenda item. But do you want to spend a minute or two discussing the issue with should not versus must not with 550 codes that's been on the email list?
Oh, the one that brought on the mailing list at the end.
Yeah.
Shall we do it at the end if we have time?
Okay.
Good point. If somebody,
I just don't want to. I don't want to slip through the cracks by accident. Otherwise, I don't care.
Okay. Can you remind us at the end if we don't run out of time?
If there is an end, I will certainly try to remind you.
Okay. Thank you, John. So we have a fair amount of tickets for applicability statement. Actually, while reviewing them, I think a lot of them can get closed, or at least we can say on the mailing list saying, look, this is now ready to be closed. Please voice your opinion. And I don't think a lot of them will take a lot of time. Obviously, none of the decisions here are final. They will be brought in to the mailing list, but would be nice to get indication on this. So that's the rest of the tickets, and then starting on with the main body of the work. This is very quick. I don't really want to talk much about this. Ned Fried passed away in May. I think there will be something in the plenary tomorrow about this. A lot of us knew Ned, and I think his counsel would have been very helpful in this room, but all right. Okay, so starting with the foreclose and receive header fields. I looked at the ticket. I nearly closed it. I sent John a quick message saying, well, I think we need to do this tweak. And then he said, no, I think we need to talk about this. So this is 4 slides from John. And John, you want to present them? And then we'll have a discussion. The only thing I will add is actually, for this discussion, I will be as a participant, not as a chair, because I might have a stronger opinion. So I will ask Todd to arbitrate and make sure that judge consensus. Go, John.
Okay, I posted a moderately long note to the list earlier in the week, and an internet draft which discusses this at the same time. I hope and assume that everybody has read both of them. So this is intended more as a quick review than as a complete analysis. The question when we start messing with received clauses, optional received clauses, including 4, is these things has been seriously underdefined since the beginning, and we've been picking at them in little ways, but not necessarily getting it right or changing them. So the question which I was prompted to ask when I started looking at this in the current text of 5321 bis was, first of all, go back and look at the question what the 4 clause is for. And 821 doesn't say a word about it. It provides some syntax and indicates an optional field, and the syntax points to a path, which, since we eliminated paths, is now basically a mailbox. But it just gives the mailbox name syntax. And like all components of trace fields, and I hope this is clear enough in the current document, but if it isn't, we've got another issue. The primary intended use is debugging. The assumption was never that users were going to look at these fields unless they had questions or got into trouble. So the value associated with 4 is generally assumed to be a mailbox of the intended recipient. But again, we don't really say that very quickly. And if we did, we would have trouble with what intended recipient means, which is what the current debate is all about in a way. So it's never been clear what to do with multiple receipt commands. Clause is only permitted to be used once per received field. And as we have more recently discussed, it can easily disclose information intended to be private, and we've talked about BCC mailboxes, but that's not actually the only case. Next slide. So in the current text, we've got a general warning about accidental information disclosure, especially for sites with special circumstances. We're not going to define special circumstances. And we advise against providing 4 when there's more than one recipient address, i.e. more than one receipt command. And the particular statement there is badly written and should be cleaned up if it's to be retained. And for the badly written part, you could flog the editor, except unfortunately I'm remote. If our goal is to prevent disclosure of potentially sensitive information, there are a bunch of other cases having to do with the fact that we allow MPAs in transit a great deal of flexibility about uncombining and recombining messages, and I should suggest them uncombining. We're very, very vague about when that's possible. We don't force it, we don't prohibit it. And we may need to rethink this entirely, when it should be provided and at what stages, rather than just providing a quick text patch. Next slide. So, obvious solutions, borrowing these things in the order in which they appear in that internet draft, are to conclude 4 is just too dangerous, we need to get rid of it. Allow it only at message submission time, because the submission system, including both any submission servers and the MUA, are the only ones who really know what the intended recipient is, what should be kept private and what shouldn't. Or we decide we don't care about these other cases, fix the bad sentence and move on. Next slide.
Pause for you now, or?
And if we decide to stay with where we are but fix the sentence, the bad sentence that's here on the screen, Alexi's improved version after a few iterations is at the bottom of the screen, and that's where we are right now.
Okay.
And I noticed we've accumulated a large queue.
Barry.
This is Barry Liba. So I think it's not sufficient to do the multi-recipients thing, because even with a single recipient, forwarding the message can cause all sorts of exposure. Todd, can you back up, or whoever's controlling the slides, can you back up a slide? Yeah, so I primarily support 1.1. I think we should deprecate it. The only concern I have is whether that violates our minimal changes rule. But I think saying that you should not include it in new messages, but it's still going to appear in older implementations might be sufficient. But we should at least do one of those varieties of one, either 1.1 or 1.2. That's my opinion.
Quick comment, the minimum changes rule is definitely a question, but the answer to a different question is that we are explicitly allowed to deprecate things which experientially haven't worked out in moving to full standards. So it's our rule that's a problem. It is not a more global rule that's a problem.
Okay, then I will say my vote is for 1.1.
Alexi?
Okay, so I do have a dissenting opinion here, and I might be in minority. We'll see about that. First, I did quick search on what existing MTAs do. So I checked, I saw the own implementation, and I checked EXIM. Both only emit 4 if there is a single recipient. So, which kind of confirms my theory of how this is supposed to work. You know, whether it was how it was intended, I don't know, because I wasn't around at the time, but this is my perception of how I would like, you know, I think it should work. So, the second thing is, we did actually have a request at work where sometimes it's useful to have indicator of whether you're to OCC recipient, right? So email client shows whether you're to OCC recipient. And there is a similar request for knowing whether you're receiving it as to OCC mailing list. In this case, you know, 4 can potentially, if message with a single recipient goes to a mailing list, it gets expanded, it can get 4 mailing list address added, and then later on you can figure out that you actually got this because of the mailing list. So I find some utility in this. The third comment is, as far as I'm concerned, MTAs I've seen don't make the mistake of leaking information. They only emit 4 if there is a single recipient, which also means I mean, it's up to MTAs to decide. They can split the message into multiple transactions, at which point they're separate messages, separate transactions with a single recipient, and then they can still emit it. Whether they do or don't, I don't know.
Just to clarify, Alexei, you've made a very strong argument for inserting the 4 at the sending end. And I think that's fine, but it brings us rapidly in the direction of option 2 on the slide. The complicated situations all arise in shuffling and reshuffling, as Barry pointed out, forwarding, and as you pointed out, what we do with list expansion or sending to a list and whether that gets a recipient name after a while. And the only option I'm opposed to here is weakening the rule that MTAs are expected to poke around in previous headers in order to know what to do next.
Can I just go ahead? So yeah, I basically kind of leaning toward more of 2 or 3 option. And I think your option 2 is actually not sufficient. I think MTA should be still allowed to do that, basically.
Well, that raises some other questions which are beaten to death in the internet draft.
Hi, this is Victor Duchovny, also, I guess, number 2 on the postfix project. Also only adds 4 when there's a single recipient. I should note that we're talking about a trace header that happens on entry into the mail system. So at each hop, we're recording what we received from the previous SMTP talker. And if that SMTP talker sent us 1 recipient, that's when we add that 1 unique recipient that we received at that hop. 2 is definitely just fundamentally flawed. That's not a good option. Strongly vote for 3. Also, lots of use cases where sufficiently knowledgeable users, in fact, find the 4 information in the trace headers, and postmasters likewise find it quite useful. When I complain about spam, I often want to know which of my thousands of email addresses I received the spam for. The spam does not disclose that in the 2 RCC headers, but I see it in the 4, and I want it there. In any case, whatever the draft ultimately says, I predict that Postfix will make no changes in the space. You can shout up and down, but it will be 3 forever. The language can be clarified to warn some hypothetical MTA that gets this wrong. I don't know of any.
Thank you. And I would like to remind everybody in the room, everybody in the room still please add themselves to the queue for Meet Echo.
Hi, it's Pete Resnick. I am strongly encouraging us to go for number 3. I think deprecating it is a mistake for many of the reasons that that Victor brought up. With a single address, it's quite useful information. The fact of the matter is this is deployed as number 3 for almost all systems. And given our charter, we should not be trying to make a new deprecation at this point. We want to put something in the AS about it. We want to write a new document. That's fine. Let's stick with number 3 and just do it that way.
John Levine. I'm actually going to agree with Victor, but use different words. And my preference is what I would call 3 minus minus, which is this entire discussion reeks of hubris. We have no idea all the ways that people are going to route their email. So what I would say is simply note that anything in the 4 clause, like the rest of the received header, is visible to any subsequent party that handles or receives the message. And if that's a security issue, you should keep it in mind before adding the clause and stop there, because I don't know what else I can say that wouldn't have endless exceptions.
Barry Lieba again. I wanted to respond to mostly Alexei, but also some of the rest, that there's no doubt that it's useful for some people if it's there. I want to remind people that it's often not there. You cannot rely on it. So given what other people have said about 3, I'm okay if we decide in 3 that in 5321 bis we go with 3. But we also put something in the AS saying that we're basically deprecating it or advising against using it because of all of the exposures. I find that the privacy implications are stronger to me than the usefulness of it, and I would rather be very strong about avoiding using it for that reason. Thanks.
I'm going to limit discussion on this to 2 more minutes. Braun, you're up, and then Pete, and then Daniel.
Yeah, I'm going to say that as someone who works reading email headers a lot, it's very useful to me. It might not be useful to you, Barry, but for a lot of people, it really is useful for things. And if you're scrubbing mail to remove things being forwarded on, you have to scrub lots of places anyway. It can also be a receive for header. There's lots of other things can wind up being added at each hop. If you want to be really clean against stuff being seen through, you're going to have to filter out a lot more than just this header. I also am very much in favor of 3. Make the text clear that it can leak if it gets forwarded on, and think about it, and that's it.
And this is Pete. I honestly don't understand the serious privacy implications of the single recipient introduction of the 4. If it was sent to me, I received it, and I forward it, what I forward is my decision. It is now out of SMTP's hands. And if I need to clean up a message, then I need to clean up a message. That's not a protocol privacy issue, and I don't think it belongs in this document.
Daniel Van Gilmore, I'll be quick. Also speaking in favor of 3, I believe. So I think that there are multiple people in this room who have strong opinions about how one should scrub email. And I think that is worth doing as a separate project in terms of removing potentially leaking things. And that would be worth noting that here. I also wanted to note that when we just talk about deprecating it, I don't think that's actually particularly useful because there's deprecating reliance on it and there's deprecating inclusion of it. And those are two distinct things. And I think it's a mistake to just randomly say we deprecate this without being clear which side we're talking about deprecating. I think the simplest thing is to say, here are the risks and work actively on a scrubbing draft separately.
Thank you. I believe in the room here, we've landed on consensus on 3. Any dispute on that? No? All right,
Well,
move on.
it raises a separate question, which is the difference, as you tell me to go off and fix text, which is the difference between 3 and 3 minus minus. Under 3, we tune the existing language a little bit and then go forward. Under 3 minus minus, for which I have some sympathy, we don't address, we tear the bad sentence out and replace it with nothing. There's already language in the document, pointer see that ID, that talks a little bit about this and language about whether or not people should rely on it and whether they should, and whether or not it should be provided when there are edge cases, probably belongs to the AS. So the 3 minus minus option is even to tear some of this stuff which we put in back out. And I'm actually more comfortable with that option than I am with 3 by itself, or especially when we decided not to do the others. And I could clarify what deprecated number 1 means, but it's probably not worth the effort.
Okay. Shall we take it to the mailing list? Or maybe, are you happy with trying to do the fix on the next slide I propose, and then have a quick discussion about whether we want to move this text to AS or whether it should stay? Does it work? Does it work for you?
I think as far as 5321 is concerned, I and several people who've spoken, Barry included, are closer to 3 minus minus than to 3, and that would argue against choosing either of the options on the next slide. So I think we're bound for the mailing list, but I hope that this time people will actually participate on the mailing list and respond in soon time rather than in November.
Okay, quickly. So Victor said suggestion is fine.
Yeah, this is Pete. I think it would be a mistake to completely yank the sentence. I think the suggested replacement is fine, but I think making believe that this document can get away with not discussing it at all is probably a mistake. We should try just fix the sentence. I think that's a good fix and move on.
And Barry notes as well, so.
Pete, have you read the ID and noticed that there are other places in documents where this is discussed?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I guess I don't feel exceedingly strongly about it, but there it is in this section. It's been there. My inclination is to fix a mistake, which that first sentence, the existing sentence is, it's just a mess, rather than just ditch it. I wouldn't throw myself on my sword to keep it, but I think the fix is fine.
I'm not throwing myself on any swords either, but I note that this is not 5321 text that we're talking about bad sentences in. It's text we put in a meeting or two ago. So this is recent text and it's still on the target list. I don't feel nearly as strongly about this as I probably sound, but I think we need to make a careful and considered decision here rather than shrugging our shoulders and moving on. And I think the text which is in a document, most of which is from 5321, is very much part of this picture. One of the problems with 5321 in this document and 2821 is there's altogether too much redundant text which talks in almost the same way about almost the same things. And that's a danger in itself.
Can I still suggest you try to apply the text and then we'll have a review on the mailing list of the whole document of the sole issue then? Are you okay with that?
Since I have no immediate instructions to when I'm going to do a new version, I'm okay with that, but it's almost meaningless as far as what anybody else sees. Applying the new text is obviously easy.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to suggest a way of getting closure on the document. This is pretty much one of the two issues remaining.
And I would argue that especially since this is a full standard and based upon the number of people attending this meeting, interest seems to be waning, that we should really get it right. But let's take the mailing list. And I guess to answer your question, I am as happy putting in your text and then arguing it should be taken out as I am leaving the old text and then arguing it should be taken out.
Let's just do revision to the list, right, with the text. That's where we want to go. I don't feel like we're going to solve this problem in the 35 minutes we have remaining. We've got other tickets to get to, so let's get the discussion. Let's move the discussion onto the list and keep going with it. But I think some flavor of option 3, whether it's 3 or 3 minus minus, is where we're going with this. We have some proposed text on the slide here, or discussion of the text on the slide here. So let's see what we can hammer out on the list and move forward on this.
John, I think there will be a slight definition of compromise. I think everybody is equally unhappy, so let's move on. All right. Okay. My favorite issue I love to hate. Hopefully, I read the mailing list on this topic, and I thought it would be actually more controversial than I thought. I expected it to be more controversial, but it looks like very proposed text. John, the other John, did a tweak to it, and people said, yeah, I can live with this. Dave Crocker did a tweak, and they said he can live with it. And John, you said you can live with it. With that in mind, hold on. My proposal is to kind of, if we can quickly agree that we can all live with this. The other suggestion is, if we can live with it, well, I think we should just try expert review and see how it works. And if we really hate it, then we can do a tweak later on. But I think whatever is on the table is already better than what we have in the document. Go on, John.
I'm not going to fall on my or anybody else's sword over this because I'm tired of it. But I want to ask a question I've tried asking several times. I've never gotten an answer. Do we have real-world cases in which someone has proposed an extension for other than private use in a small community and has found the current situation burdensome or too burdensome? I know this is a general problem with banner registrations, and as I've said in other places, I'm very, very concerned about those. But I'm still haunted by Marshall's argument about sparsity, and am wondering whether we have real-world cases which justify worrying about this, or whether it is just a theory. problem.
Okay, some of it probably wasn't said on the mailing list, but my interpretation of comments received from one proponent is actually that specification required would be sufficient. Even though the person went into more details saying, you know, all the troubles that he got into and that there was no champion, it wasn't the same issue. So I think with one or more experts which are trying to be helpful and friendly, I think that's not going to be a problem. At least that's my interpretation of the proposal.
And again, that set of comments did not seem to be about a real world problem, which was a problem. It seemed much more about a more theoretical set of questions, but maybe I didn't understand it.
Yeah, I'll figure it out later.
Okay, quickly, Victor?
Expert review sounds excellent. I'll in fact be an early user of it at some point before too long.
Okay. Barry?
I'll pick the next slide.
So this is Barry. The reason I wanted to get to this slide before I said anything is I want to make sure that we agree that this slide has the right guidance for the designated expert. This is what I proposed that John tweaked and Dave tweaked, and I think the three of us are probably good with this. Is everybody else good with this? So.
As a participant and as somebody who didn't like first come, first serve, I'm happy with this.
And a thumbs up from Braun is anybody, and a thumbs up from Murray.
And Ken.
Thumbs ups from everybody I see in the room. Okay, this is all cool. I think we're done with this now. And I think we spent collectively way too much time on it, so let's move on.
Okay. Hurrah, we declare victory. I was so depressed last time, I have to say. Okay. Right, do you want to, or do you want me to talk? Okay, so we are moving on to the applicability statement issues. Some of these, there is too much text to really show in the room or to live edit. I think this particular issue is we had 2 rounds of discussions chaired by Todd. Then I think Ken incorporated it in the latest revision, and this is just a reminder for people to have a look at this. I think the text is baked. I personally propose just to do a small tweak to the text, which I can send to the mailing list. But I think this is good enough and hopefully ready to be closed. Final call for final call. So we'll take it to the mailing list to double check that people are happy with this. And unless there are strong objections on the mailing list, I think this one will be closed. Okay. This one is actually new. I don't think we discussed it. Pete, I'm so sorry. This is your ticket. That's why I can't. Yeah. There was basically a suggestion saying that maybe something should be said about this in applicability statement. We have no proposal so far. I think. What do you want to do?
My proposal is always make me write less text and move it to the applicability statement.
No, we can still make you write text. It's just
Well,
not going to end up in your document.
But I don't
That's-
have to do it now.
Okay. Do you remember what you meant by this.
I think there was someone either posted in errata or something else about the 78 question and whether it should have said 77 with the fold or what have you.
So last time I checked, I think your document is fine and very clear.
I think, we may want to give examples in the AS to explain that there are going to be times with headers that you're not going to have a nice fold point, and so you may need to do something different. And John has a comment, and
Okay.
maybe he can come up with what the heck we were talking about.
John?
My only question here, Pete, before you sit down, is the use of the word always in that first clause. Because that's always absent SMTP extensions and various other kinds of weird stuff.
Say it again, sorry.
It's always plus or minus MIME and
Right.
SMTP stuff. So if it says always, you may need to think a little bit about that choice of words.
Right.
Other than that, I don't think there's a problem here that's even worth messing with in the AS.
Yep.
Does that solve your problem?
I'm not entirely sure what was proposed, to be honest.
What was proposed was move the ticket to the AS instead of leaving it on 5322 bis.
It's already done. It's already for AS, but the question is, what do you want in AS to be said about this?
Who is Todd ostensibly the author?
No, person behind you.
The person behind me is ostensibly the author. We'll work offline on some text. I'll propose some text to him and he can put it in and he will bug me.
Okay, can you do it this week, please?
He will bug me to get the text done.
As ostensibly one of the other authors, please include me in the loop.
Okay.
Yes, not a problem.
All right, 3 of you will discuss some text and bring it to the mailing list. Thank you. Right. Ticket number 35, erratum 3135 about quarter string definition. Basically, this is the current text in AS that talks about funky use of empty quotes in left-hand side and how it is likely to cause problems in the real world. I think suggestion is to close this ticket as done. If people have any objections in the room, and we'll double check this on the mailing list. Going once, going twice. Okay. Okay, ticket 51 is about format elements in web forms. This was actually raised by Ned Fried. I think the issue is that many web forms are being too strict. They don't even allow pluses and various other things. So this is about adding some text saying that based on A, B, and F, you should really be accepting these funky characters, like probably forward slashes, equal signs, and pluses, at least. Well, in addition to dots and alphanumeric stuff. Obviously, there is no text, but this is kind of deciding which direction we want to go in this. Barry?
This is Barry Lieba. What about internationalized email addresses? Do we want to go there in the applicability statement?
Good point, probably a separate ticket.
Okay. And
Because this is talking about forms not accepting box standard US ASCII addresses, which would be otherwise valid.
right, but the question is whether we should also
Okay.
talk about forms accepting non-ASCII.
Okay, can we have it as in the minutes as a thing to discuss as well? Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay,
Ron?
Ron?
I guess my question is, do we expect this to have any effect, putting it in this document? Is there any point in telling web forms what they should do? And do you think they would listen?
I think there would be in a sense, but there is actually, you really have to be ABNF expert to figure it out from the base spec. This is a common enough problem. So maybe at least, if it's written down, then you can point people to say, look, it says there that you should do it.
Cool.
That's kind of the point of it. Okay. John Clancy?
Say almost what you said. This is worth doing to have something to point to, and something to point to that is written in relatively plain English rather than ABNF or whatever language 5321 or 5324 written in, which is not English. Will it by itself have any effect? No, but having a clear pointer is useful. And I say this as somebody who has this problem a couple times a week and needs something to point it to, and that's more or less the argument that Dan made.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Hans-Jörg?
Hi, this is Hans-Jörg Habel. I think this is a very useful thing. So, I mean, I see Bron's concerns that obviously that might not change things immediately somehow, but I think this is really something in my personal experience, even I experience on a weekly basis that there are ill-defined validation algorithms. And also when we do migration projects, we see many different systems to accept many different standards. And many of that is basically, I think, done in libraries. Right. So actually, if we can point library developers to this, that might be great. And that might even have an impact in the long term. I'm not sure about the ABNF, if it's really so easy. What I think would be really helpful in addition is maybe to have a repository, a list of example data, which can be tested for those library developers or something.
Okay. Ken, so we can probably collaborate and we can find other people to help you with this. John?
If I may throw a spanner in the works, the HTML living standard has an email address validation pattern, which vast numbers of libraries and web applications actually use. And if we can't persuade them to make their pattern match our pattern, we are completely wasting our time. And their pattern specifically says, we know this is only a subset of what the mail spec says, but we think it matches what actual mail systems accept. And it's not terrible, but my guess is we're not thrilled about it. So I would like talk to Mark Nottingham or somebody. Basically, if we can't get their pattern and our pattern in sync, like we'll just confuse people and we're not going to improve things. Okay. Apropos the question about.
I think that's fair. Let's minute this. That we need to double check whether how restrictive it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I don't think they're hostile to having stuff. They're hostile to updating it. I think they just there have been a lot of pranks, and particularly back when there was a fork between the W3C and what WIG. W3C said, "Oh, we're going to make it. We're going to do EAI, so all Unicode characters are valid," which of course is stupid.
Right.
Yeah, and apropos the Unicode, I don't want to go there simply because having done a fair number of experiments with EAI mail systems, I see no pattern whatsoever in what character sets EAI addresses actually allow. So I wouldn't know what to say.
Okay. Well, at least we kind of declared this a separate ticket, so we'll figure it out when we get to it.
Real quick, as an attempt to take the path of least resistance, would it be sufficient for the EAS just to reference the document John just mentioned and say that web forms do have a restricted set, consult this spec to see what's allowed?
To be honest, when I look at regular expressions, my brain still hurts. I kind of would like it in plain English.
Apropos of that, their pattern is not horrible, but it could be better. I think if we could engage with them constructively and say, hey, we're the mail experts and here's a pattern that we think will work, they might well just say, oh, thank you.
Yes. I mean, we shouldn't rule out ability to actually do changes if they are well argued from our part. All right. John?
I think we need to understand, relative to what John Barr was saying, that there is an active feud going on between W3C and what WG over some of these issues. And the last thing we want to do is to point to one or the other of their documents, one or the other of their incomprehensible documents, and say, pay attention to that incomprehensible document rather than the other incomprehensible document or our incomprehensible document. Clear English
Yes.
language here would be a good idea.
Okay. Victor, you figured out.
Yes, the interface is lost. I can volunteer to write fairly advanced regular expressions if people want that. I don't
That's
get
not-
scared by them.
Okay, that's not actually what.
No, but if we want to, you said,
No, okay. I think if people want to do regular expression, it's kind of a separate topic in a sense of,
Right.
and there was actually a separate proposal
Okay.
drafted at the time. I would like this written in plain English first,
Okay.
and then we can figure out whether we want to include regular expression, and we can do a call on the mailing list.
Okay.
All right, thank you for volunteering. DKG, very quickly.
Yeah, I definitely think that we should exert what influence we have on the other standards bodies to produce something that is regularly usable. And that does mean some amount of functional material, which is like a regular expression. I'm fine if that goes alongside English text, but I think the test suite that you're describing is really the key thing, to say, here's a bunch of things, this one is valid, here's why it's valid, here's why it's not, right? But if that set of three things is really what you want if you want people to take it seriously as implementers. Test suites, specific regular expressions, and an English overview.
Okay, point taken. All right, Ken, I think you have enough direction for initial version, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, trying to speed up a little bit. Oh yeah, the new ticket that people wanted to discuss. So the current AS basically has a stub version in the MIME section, and I think some people want to change that. Let's have a chat. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken flipped our order. This is Barry. Ken and I talked about this the other day, and I think the answer to this is that we should say a fairly minimal amount about MIME there. Because what's likely to happen is when we're finished with 5321 and 5322 BISs, we will consider adding MIME as our next pass. And at that point, we will probably revise the applicability statement for that. But right now, all we should say is that MIME is a widely implemented and very important extension to internet message format. Go there and look at it, and we will talk more about this later. And that's probably all we should say.
Okay. Pete is saying +1, +2, +10. Okay. Ken?
So real quick, Barry, Pete, are we looking for like normative text, like we recommend you support this, you should support this? Are we going to dig into it and say these parts of the spec have never been used, avoid them?
You're really digging
With
into it,
respect
aren't
to,
you?
with respect to MIME?
Yes.
Not now. I mean, I think all we should do now is say, this is widely deployed and it's documented here, and further advice will come later. And that's all I would want to say now.
Yeah, it doesn't actually, I think it doesn't have to be normative. And Pete is quite good at phrasing things which are normative, but without using shoulds or musts. Yeah, pretty much, you know. Okay. Okay, that was actually quicker than I expected. Sounds good. I'm going to, so there are 3 more slides on issues which I think should be closed. Again, subject to mailing list verification, etc., etc. If people want to object, I think we probably should take discussion to the mailing list realistically, but if people want to. Okay, Barry says yes. Okay.
Is that yes to take it to the mailing list? Or yes
No,
to
just close the ticket. John?
It started was not about, at least one of the places where this started, was not about the domain names with its addresses, but about the use of IP addresses. And,
There is a separate ticket about this. Hold on.
okay, if there's a separate ticket about that, that's fine.
It's the next slide, actually. IP addresses in hello.
Then I have no problem with closing the previous one, and we should deal with this if we need to.
Okay, and the proposal is to close this one as well.
Since I've still got video on, I will record by holding my nose, but I can look at this.
Okay. Please, yeah. Sounds good. And the last one, do you want to just quickly?
I know that the proposal was to close this ticket because that's what it said in the ticket documentation itself. So let me just find that real quick. Oh, yeah, this was about, there are timeout specifications that are in 5321 and probably previous issue or previous versions. And there had been some discussion about whether or not to revisit them because they seem really freaking long for modern networks versus when 821 was first written. As we've discussed it over the months, there's been a whole lot of, might as well leave them. There's been no.
But they're also like IoT networks where it's
Right,
still relevant.
right.
So
There's been no call to change them whatsoever, so the proposal is just to close the ticket. John?
We could, if people wanted to, I'm not necessarily in favor of it, put a little bit of text in the AS which points out that under many circumstances, those timeouts, in the modern world, those timeouts may be a little bit long. But I don't know at the moment how to write that text, and would prefer we didn't, but we should be sure that we don't eliminate that possibility without thinking about it. If we thought about it, we should move on.
okay, so we're actually at the end of the slides. The only thing I propose, maybe we'll look at outstanding tickets for SMTP spec, and I'll just quickly talk about. Oh yeah, John, do you want to talk about your thing first, or shall we look at tickets first?
Let's talk about that briefly, very briefly, because I think that it's. I think we're having an argument that borders on the. Let's supposed to say words like silly, but silly. It's clear to at least many of us that we cannot promote that to a bus stop for operational reasons. I don't understand the correspondence of the list because I think that the person who is advocating changing it to a must turned around and explained why it should be a should. So I'm confused. I just did not want to let this go past this meeting without at least some minimal discussion and awareness of what's going on. If we have to continue arguing with them on the list, I guess that's our fate.
Barry?
This is Barry. I completely agree with John. The only thing that needs to change is the not needs to be capitalized as well. Capital should, lowercase not is not a BCP 14 keyword. Otherwise, it's fine.
If the stupid editor made that mistake, a stupid editor will correct it.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the list of issues?
Anything else for 22?
This,
All the issues closed for 22?
yes. I think so. Let's do this first. Okay. We do have 5 minutes. Right. So we have some way forward toward Chicken 55, the 4 calls received. We, I think, pretty much closed IANA registration policy. There are 2 tickets, 61 and 12, about mailing lists and improved definition of mailing lists. So a few months ago, Ned proposed to write a document. This is not going to happen now. I tend to think that we probably don't have energy for this. So I suggest we just do nothing. Should people in slow time write a document on the topic, we can revise it some future date. And the only other ticket is Nullimax, and I think discussion was that the current text is okay-ish, and so I should close this one. John, any comments? Are you happy with this?
And at the risk of sounding like Pete, making this go away so I don't have to do anything is fine.
Fine, okay, so because Pete asked, I think there was one ticket asking for enhancement, which we're not going to do. But yeah.
This is Barry. So does that mean that after John posts the next revision for 5321 bis, we're ready for working group last call?
Absolutely, yes.
Yay!
So, yes, this was kind of a ticket, basically. Why is this so, email address is so complicated? And it's like,
Good Lord, who wrote that?
oh, it's your DMARC friend.
I was just gonna say, that looks like something somebody would have written on the DMARC list, and it was that somebody.
Right.
I'm strongly in favor of people should only be allowed one local part that may at, and then you can put all on the domain side.
Okay, so yeah, I don't think we'll deal with this. Are you happy with this, Pete?
Not dealing with it, I'm very happy not
You
dealing
know,
with it.
we try that over at DMARC, and he just keeps coming back, so we can try to ignore him, but it doesn't work.
Yes, this is public and recorded.
Also too much conversation off mic, so
All right, so, and if we look at list of issues for applicability statement, it actually doesn't look too bad. So we'll have some text about the first one. We're about to close the second, number 54. We talked about 51. I think we're about to close number 40, recommended SMTP extensions, but I'll bring it to the mailing list. There will be some suggestion about 38, close 35, close 19, close 16, close number 1. Right, number 8. This is actually kind of important, yes. This started about a year ago, and there was a long discussion about an extra registry. Going through the mailing list discussion, I realized there was no consensus, so I suggest we just drop it. And Ned was a big motivator and part of the discussion, and I think he sort of initiated it, but at the end he didn't like doing it either. So I think closing it with do nothing is probably the best way. So hopefully the plan is John will update the document, which will go to last call, knowing that next month is August, it's probably going to be September, just to make sure that people are paying attention. And then we do have some work to do on AS, but I think we will very closely, very soon we'll have a call on opening new issues. So I think it's actually getting pretty baked now. So if people think that there is a major thing which is unclear or missing, now it's a good time to actually bring it up. Not at the mic, but on the mailing list.
So this is Barry. Is our plan to send 5321 and 5322 bis to the IESG together?
Yes.
And then to send AS to the IESG sometime later? Maybe soon later, but not
Yes.
with them.
Yes. Okay. I think it sort of depends, if we feel that AS is so nearly done, like can be done within a month after that, then we can decide.
Okay. Right, I know
They are not
I was going
tied,
to say they're
no.
not tied, I know that. I'm just thinking of the burden on the IESG, and I would prefer to get 21 and 22 taken care of before the IESG sees the AS.
Oh, yeah,
And then let them
absolutely.
look at that later.
It will be before AS, it's just a question. If you send AS 9 months later, people forget what there were in the other two documents,
Maybe,
so.
a month or two later, whatever.
Okay,
Yeah, okay, I'm good with that.
cool.
John has his hand.
I'm good with that too for the same reasons, but if we're going to send the 5321 bis and 5322 bis to the ISG without waiting for the AS, we better be very, very careful with the AS. It doesn't say anything which seems to contradict the two base documents. And the good news is that if we get 5321 finished next month or in September, I will be able to pay more attention to the AS.
Okay. Sounds
But I
good.
think
Okay.
that's too much.
Hi, this is Pete. Just actually a question for Murray, but from the mic, so we all hear it. Are you okay with running the two through where we're going to have to deal with the AS? Will need to be watched to make sure it doesn't contradict and all that?
The IESG is happy not dealing with it. No, I think that's fine. I think I could even warn them that, this is coming, these are related, but they're going to be separated by a little bit. Try to remember. I can help this out.
Okay. And I was about to ask if you have anything else to say, but I think you just said what you wanted to say, so.
Thank you for the progress, and this is great. That's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you all. This was quite a productive meeting, and see you next time. Maybe we even reach out next time. You never know. Oh, this one better than next.
Yeah.